for this interview with Bill Irvine, Universal Credit expert. And in this interview, Bill, we thought we would talk a little bit more about the differences between LHA and Universal Credit. And I think, first of all, I'm already hearing kind of new terminology that that landlords are going to have to learn. Things like direct payment is now called landlord managed payment. So there's a lot to learn going forwards, isn't there?
Absolutely, it's an entirely new scheme. It's not a copy and paste job. This is not housing benefit under another name. This is a completely new scheme. The housing benefit scheme, where it was regulated with regulations and rights of appeal, this new scheme is much more discretionary based. There's many positives about the new scheme, one of which is that it's one application and it could be done online. The problem just now is we've actually got two schemes running in parallel. We've got what they call the live service, which applies in most areas, and that really is only at this point in time for single people, and 80% of them don't actually have housing costs, but the 20% that do, most of them are now in rent arrears. The other scheme is the full service scheme, which is the all singing, all dancing scheme, which is currently in Croydon, Sutton and places like that where they're piloting this. That on the face of it looks as if it's going to be a far better scheme, but at the moment it's confusing, raining every day, and landlords are really frustrated because they're doing everything they're asked to do by the Department of Works and Pensions. They're filling in these landlord managed payment applications, sometimes referred to as APAs, and we found out recently that most of these applications that have been sent by email, if they included within the email an attachment that referred to dates of birth or national insurance numbers, the DWP were deleting these emails. And that maybe accounts for the fact that in the stats it suggested there was only 7% of private landlord managed payments, when the figure should be, I reckon, up in the 20-30%, because if we use a yardstick with LHA, it's 30% are actually paid directly to landlords. And there's no reason to doubt that that level will be achieved at some point in the future.
It's incredible to hear this, because this scheme has cost billions, and then there's an error that they can't accept attachments to an email. It's quite unbelievable, actually. Any landlord watching this might say, oh well, I only take professional tenants, but I think we all have to appreciate that any tenant is only one P45 accident, illness, personal crisis, mental health problem away from having to go into receipt of benefits.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of scaremongering goes on just now about this new scheme actually taking the landlords out of the marketplace. But from 2008, every year there's actually been more people renting in the private sector than there was ever. And we've now got, I think, just under 2 million who are actually claiming in the private rented sector housing benefit. The bill is now up to 9 billion. We're now the third sector as far as housing is concerned, a very important sector. And I think it has to be recognised now. This is a very important scheme.
So let's just talk about the two key differences, because it really boils down to the direct payments and communicating with the DWP. So if we take direct payments first, once your tenant has gone into 2 months arrears or more, then you can apply for a direct payment. So what would you do in that case?
Well, in fact, you can actually apply before then. The process, the way it should be done, is that if your tenant is known to be going on to Universal Credit, there's nothing to stop that tenant from saying to the DWP job coach that they have got concerns over receiving the money themselves. The landlords can actually supply as well rent statements to those tenants, and they can take them to the job coach, and if it demonstrates there's 2 months or more rent arrears, then at that point DWP, through what they call their tier 1 factors, which are actually very similar to the LHA safeguarding rules, they can actually then at that point make payment to the landlord. If that is not done, then the landlord then has to make application through what they call a UC 47 form. Now there's two versions of that. There's one that is used by the social landlord sector. Housing associations, many of them have secure email addresses. Private landlords don't. So the social landlord can actually send it by email, and they can send attachments as well, as long as they've got a secure email address. The private landlords, and actually the majority of social landlords as well, don't have that facility. So we've now got a crazy situation where they have to send the UC47, what they call the non-secure version of it, the very basic version, to this email address, and then send the supporting documents like the rent statements showing the 2 months or more rent arrears, or the letters from the GP, the psychiatric nurse or whatever confirming vulnerability by free post to the Wolverhampton office of the DWP, and from there it's uploaded and then it's married up. That's the theory. The reality is I don't believe for 1 minute that it will be married up in all cases. Probably the majority will, but it's those minority ones where the landlord's sitting back waiting for this payment to be made and it's not made. And one of the other things the DWP didn't know they could do was actually to suspend payment when an application was made. And they gave me an assurance a year ago that when an application was received, as long as the next payment of Universal Credit wasn't due 5 days or more later, then they would actually suspend payment and they would then leave a decision on the payment of who received it until that decision was actually made. Now, contrary to that, what they've actually been doing is paying the money to the tenant, and many of the tenants are getting the money, just like they did with LHA way back in 2008, and using it for everything other than paying the rent. So we've got rent arrears already building up.
Indeed, and then the other issue is, of course, the communication, because with local housing allowance, they could have gone direct to the housing benefits office with the tenant's permission to, check out what's happening. With Universal Credit, now it's kind of like this faceless, institution that they have to somehow get through to.
Yeah, it's the DWP are the very opposite of local authorities. They are remote, they're ambivalent, they make life difficult by demanding that you have to comply with the Data Protection Act, you have to comply with confidentiality, but that equally applied to the local authorities. But they can overemphasise that, and some of the upper tier judges criticise the DWP for actually overplaying this aspect of the Data Protection Act and confidentiality. There's actually ways in which information can be relayed. One of the things they talk about is implicit consent. Implicit consent is where someone, by providing information, either national insurance number, dates of birth, or copy letters to their landlord or to the representative like me, that's sufficient for the local authority to then act on. The DWP say they are not accepting that, and yet it's actually their policy. It's their diagram. It's actually referred to implicit consent. I mean, I raised it with them over a year or so ago. Some of the staff didn't even know it existed. And things like actually applying for an APA or a landlord managed payment, the landlords are actually complying with the requirements of the DWP. They fill in all the forms, they send them as they should, and in many instances they're actually making these payments to the tenants, as I mentioned earlier on. And when they're applying for, with our help, compensation for the loss of rent, the DWP's attitude is that this is a landlord-tenant dispute, and therefore they're not going to get involved. Now, we've got a number of cases involved through the RLA. These are RLA members, and RLA has been really, really good in the way in which they've supported their members. We've now got one that's actually been pursued by one of the MPs, who happens to be also the Attorney General for the UK, and he's actually pursuing a case to the Parliamentary Commissioner on the basis that DWP refused to accept that landlords had the right to complain, which is absurd, having again confirmed to me in writing no less than a year ago, and I'm talking about the Director General no less, saying that landlords clearly had that right. So there's contradictions all the time, and there's also a fragmentation. Nobody seems to have an overview. Everybody seems to be going away and doing their own thing, and there's really nobody actually pulling these things together, and that's what we need. And they're missing the expertise of the people from the councils. They could have tapped into that information.
We could indeed. I think just to finish, Bill, we're not sort of trying to scare people off taking tenants on Universal Credit. I think what we're saying are that there are challenges, there are going to be bugs as it rolls out that need to be resolved, but clearly the way forwards is A, to become educated, and B, if you're struggling with the Universal Credit issue, to know who to speak to. Somebody like yourself or Carradon Landlord Solutions are set up to help in those instances.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think back to what happened in 2008, where the government of the day decided to pay the tenants the money, 2 years later, because of the lobbying that was done, they then changed the rules back to make it quite easy for landlords to receive payment. That's already happening now. I've got social landlord clients of mine who are now getting 50 to 60% of the payments made directly to them, because they have educated themselves, they've trained their staff, and they now know exactly what to do. And that's the same thing as what's happening with the likes of, the Property Tribes forum that you've got, Caradon Property. They've got the staff there who are dedicated to this. They've got experience of working in local authorities and the Department of Works and Pensions, and they've actually been doing this for the last 4 years with my help. So they've now got themselves up to a level of knowledge that they're able to do most of these things. I become involved where the cases are maybe more complex and they maybe have to go to a first tier tribunal or an upper tier tribunal. But there's now, it's almost like a CAB for landlords, because one of the things I've noticed since I started doing this is that landlords really don't have anyone giving this type of advice in the way it's been delivered by the likes of Caradon or myself. And where landlords are pursuing, these type of cases, the best thing to do is to get advice before they take that step.